The Department of Land Reform and Rural Development is observing 30 years of the Restitution of Land Rights Act in Tshwane. The restitution program is aimed at giving back black people their land, which they were dispossessed of as a result of the 1913 Land Act. For more on this, we cross to my colleague, news reporter Neria Tlakutsa. A very good afternoon to you, Neria. So what is happening where you are?
Good afternoon to you, Nombu. Basically, we are here in Tshwane as government and other stakeholders reflect on the 30 years of restitution of Land Rights Act. And I must say that one phrase that captures this whole mood this afternoon is what the Deputy Minister of Land Reform said when he took the podium, saying, "Give to Caesar what belongs to Caesar." And those words captured the audience who see Caesar in this instance as a black person. You must remember that the 1913 Native Land Act did ensure that black people were dispossessed of their land. Of course, we've heard the Department of Rural Development saying that there has been some movement of some sort, and they have made strides since then to ensure that at least land is taken back to their rightful owners. We also spoke to some of the beneficiaries, of course, who were saying that the process was not an easy one. It was tedious. Yes, they did get some land, but they're still waiting for more of the land that they have claimed. And right now, I just want to bring in a speaker, an activist, an advocate who has not been silent when it comes to the issue of land reform. And one thing that he said was that land restitution will basically give dispossession a face. You know, it will ensure that the dignity of the right of the black person is restored. Advocate Tembeka Ngcukaitobi, thank you so much for joining me. Let's just talk about today. You were saying we must not use statistics, we must use reality on the ground. When the department says billions have been used, you are not convinced?
No, I'm not. I think there are just two areas where statistics can mask reality, and in fact they could be misleading. If you ask the government, how many claims have you settled, land claims? Many people think, how many people have received land? And the government tells you 80% of land claims have been settled. But when you dig deeper, what you realize is that more than 90% of those claims that have been settled have been through cash compensation. So the underlying problem of land injustice has not been resolved, it's been postponed. And that is why claimants will take money on the one side, which is insufficient because the actual cash payout is very low. And on the other side, they will still persist in getting a house and demand the house from the government. So that's the one area where it's misleading. The second is where you say, how much have you spent in the last 30 years on land reform? And then they say, well, it is 58 billion rands. And then you ask yourself, has this 58 billion rand filtered through to the dispossessed who were the claimants? And what you actually do when you do that exercise, what you discover is that the primary beneficiaries of land restitution have been white landowners. And so what you find here is this, in a sense, paradoxical development in which the intention is to benefit black land claimants, but the outcome benefits white landowners. So it's in that context where I was saying the numbers are misleading because they are not reflective of the reality.
And I want us to speak about the naysayers or those that are against maybe your frame of thought, where they believe that if we go radical in terms of land reform, then we run the risk of being a Venezuela, we run the risk of being a Zimbabwe.
Well, firstly, my view is not radical. It is what is provided for in the Constitution. What I'm asking for is that the government must implement the Constitution. I'm not asking for anything that is outside the framework of the law. That's number one. But the second problem is that we have lived for 30 years under a market-driven land reform process. It has produced the most crippling inequality in the world, and it has produced an impoverished black underclass. So what we can see is that the current market-driven policy is not working. So something has to change, because the status quo simply cannot be perpetuated into another 30 years. And Venezuela, or in fact, they don't even use Venezuela, they use Zimbabwe. Yeah. So the problem in Zimbabwe was the problem of the destruction of the rule of law. And no one is advocating for the destruction of the rule of law. What we are asking for is that the rule of law has a justice component in it.
And just lastly, I want to bring in the expropriation of land without compensation. One thing you're clear on is that this rhetoric of expropriation, we need to be careful about it, because then that becomes the focus, but land reform on the other side, it suffers as a result. And this is where you're bringing the bill, where you're saying that's not the focus. We should, in fact, have a bill which will ensure equity, in terms of land. Let's speak more about that.
Yes. So expropriation without compensation is another fiction, because if you look at the current bill is not speaking about redistribution of land to people who need it for production, for occupation, or for feeding themselves. That bill focuses on acquiring property for the state, right? South Africans are not looking to give the state more property. They are looking to get property for themselves. So it is a complete misnomer to park the debate on land reform under the expropriation bill. What we need is a land redistribution bill in which it is clear that the state only plays the role of facilitator. It acquires and distributes. Within that bill, we need a policy statement that is very clear on payment for land. Some land needs to be paid, and there are differences in amounts. What you cannot have is a one-size-fits-all, in which every piece of land that is taken is without compensation. I always make this example. Take the people of Xolobeni in the Eastern Cape. The Australians discovered a mineral called titanium. But in order to optimize the mining of that mineral, they need the community to live. If your policy is every time you expropriate the land, you do it without compensation, are you going to compensate them or not? My own opinion is that they need compensation which is even above market value. Not compensation below market value, but above market value, which is why I say the focus should be what does justice and equity require. On the other hand, take a farmer who lives in Germany but has 5 different farms, 4 of which are lying fallow, and they are kept purely for speculative purposes. But there are communities around the farm that are desperate because they have no land and no houses, and the government wants to expropriate that farm. Should you pay compensation? There I agree that you should not pay compensation, and if you do, it must be nominal. That is not because I am fixed on the notion of without compensation. I am fixed on the notion of what justice requires in each and every case.
Thank you so much for your time, Advocate Ngcukaitobi, SC. Of course, here in this gathering, people are clear that what needs to happen from here on is that the land that was dispossessed from black people needs to return to them. And, the Deputy Minister of Kosta did start his speech with something very powerful, a song that is known by many where it says, Tina Sizwe, Sabantu abamnyama sikhalela umhlaba wethu, loosely translated as us as black people, we are crying for our land back. And this is a song that made those in attendance stand up and clap, because they all believe that as we reflect on the 30 years of the restitution program, there needs to be a way that government speeds up this process. There needs to be a way that government ensures that the land goes back to those who are dispossessed, which is in the main black people.
All right. Thank you so much, my colleague there, Neria Tlakuta.